Nick says that he had feelings that it might be happening. To all of us, it was out of nowhere. So even at the highest level, even if you are the editor-in-chief, you have to worry about whether today is your last day. With the Escapist, they attempted to get rid of everyone who, for them, wasn't making a profit and keep the people who they thought were necessary to keep the profitable stuff alive. And one of the things that we saw is they fired Nick without understanding how much stuff Nick did.
So to see that all of you guys come together and all leave at once, that was beautiful. Like that did honestly move me some. This is like a TV movie. This is like, oh, what really happened?
Yeah.
It was just beautiful, man. It was beautiful. I loved it. Hello and welcome to Culturescape, the show that interviews the geek creators and influencers who built nerd culture. What happened at the Escapist? Just a few weeks ago, the once influential and very popular video game news site suffered an extreme upset when, in the blink of an eye, almost the entirety of their staff resigned from the company due to the abrupt firing of editor-in-chief Nick Calandra by the ownership company Gamers. Today, we have special guest JM8, who is an indie game designer, lecturer, and former member of the Escapist team. He is now a founding member of Second Wind, the company that rose from the Escapist's ashes, a new gaming news video operation built pretty much overnight, and at least for now, is very popular. We will talk to JM8 about what happened at the Escapist, what's going on with Second Wind, principles of game design, and what's it like being on the other side of the table when it comes to content creation news. He does a wonderful series of videos that he did for Escapist, now for Second Wind, called Design Delve. I highly recommend you check it out. And for our fun, stupid nerd question of the day, we're going to talk a little bit about Game Show Awards. What is JM8's Game of the Year for 2023, and what should or should not count as an indie game? It's a very controversial topic right now, so I'd love to get into all that. And nevertheless, here we go. Welcome to the show, JM8.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It is an honor to have you here. I have been a fan of the Escapist for as long as I've been interested in games journalism, even going back to the days of early IGN, early Kotaku. So we're 2010, 2011 to 2014. So I've been a follower, reader, listener of the podcast that you guys do over there for a long time. So
awesome.
Everything that happened there kind of shocked me. I was like, oh no. My whole gaming listing schedule has just been deleted. So I was a little miffed. But then Second Wind came together, and it's just been very awesome. So I appreciate you coming on the show to talk with us today.
More than welcome. Yeah, I want to say it was just as shocking for all of us. It happened out of nowhere. But yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. It seems like a lot of what's been happening in the game journalism world, game influencer, game content creation, what you would ever call that space, but it would happen at a micro scale. Usually it's like something that's like, this is an epoch story, and instead of a decade or for years, it's just a second and everything switched, and then Escape is gone. I mean, it's still technically around, but it's not doing well. It's on the deathbed. And then Second Wind just pops up immediately and has ready to go graphics, videos to go. I mean, it was amazing to watch that happen so fast. Yeah, that's kind of fitting that we chose to use the kind of Phoenix iconography, because that's kind of what it was like. It was in an instant our entire world, because you have to realize that everyone who worked at the Escapist on the video team worked on it full time. And it was our entire being. And as you know, as a content creator, you put your all into these things. And overnight, or even in the span of a few minutes, we got the news, and suddenly everything in our world was dead. And then we were like, nah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna make this work, and decided to do something else. And as you said, overnight, we got it put together, which was a massive struggle. But it's interesting to think about games media and journalism and as a whole, and not just games journalism, but specific video games media. If this was coming, and if this is coming for other potential video production places
thinking of stuff like Polygon and IGN and stuff like that, like, because the corporate kind of wheel that turns, trying to get ever bigger and bigger profits, it's not conducive to the type of content that a lot of gaming outlets are putting out video-wise, which is something that we've tried to take, and we have proven over years that, you know, the kind of Patreon model, which we're seeing a lot of solo creators doing, is viable for media companies, or we don't really consider ourselves like a media outlet anymore, but it is conducive to a larger team. And it's interesting to think of, is this coming for other places?
Yeah, there was just yesterday, there was an announcement, the company that owns Digital Foundry, Eurogamer, that they are looking at trying to find someone else, or perhaps just shuttering the whole thing down, which is a surprise because Digital Foundry is doing pretty well for itself, at least in the space of like serious game design, breaking down the videos, technical analysis. They're doing something that no one else is doing, and to see them get just tossed out the window potentially just like that, it feels shocking, especially people who aren't familiar with journalism. However, as someone that has worked as a freelance journalist, I tell you, this attitude from corporations does not surprise me one bit, unfortunately.
Yeah, it happens a lot. And like, I don't know these specific numbers, but Yahtzee does. It's how much the Escapist had been tossed around and bought and stuff like that. So I joined the Escapist nearly 3 years ago, and I only went through one buyout. So we went from Enthusiast Gamings over to Gamers, and that also happened overnight. We were not warned. We were not told. We all just woke up to a message from Nick saying, yeah, so EG sold us. We now have new owners. And it, as you know, it happens all the time, and it really sticks a thorn in the side of creative content generation, because a lot of the times, especially for writers, you have no idea, like, one, if you're going to have a job the next day. When we got bought out, we thought, oh, are they just going to like completely fire like 10 people out of nowhere, or are they just going to, you know, pull a series down because they don't think it's making enough money or something? So there's that constant fear of, is today going to be the last day? Because out of nowhere, like, Nick is a perfect example of this. Nick has been doing fantastic work, or was, because we no longer work there, was doing fantastic work on the Escapist. He took it from, you know, effectively just being Yahtzee to bringing loads of different creators and trying to build up another kind of house of creators that can draw in more people. That includes like me and Frost and like Darren Mooney and stuff like that. And he was doing a fantastic job, but started a different kind of business model with the whole Patreon situation, and took it to the point where like the Escapist was starting to turn a profit, but that profit wasn't enough and fast enough for Gamers. So in an instant, fired Nick. And that's why Nick says that he had feelings that it might be happening, and that it was coming, but to all of us, it was out of nowhere. And that's what was so shocking. So even at the highest level, even if you are the editor-in-chief, you have to worry about whether today is your last day.
It's crazy. From what I've read and what I've followed, you guys have been saying, it sounds like, obviously, some of the background here is, of course, Escapist has had many ups and downs. It's been in very many iterations. Yahtzee's basically been there during the whole thing, but you know, it kind of fell apart 2014 after kind of the Gamergate stuff, and most of the original ownership left. We interviewed Alex Macris, who was part of that generation, one of the founders. And then, you know, it went through a few more iterations, and eventually it got to Gamers, which is the one that you've been under, and you saw the buyout. Which is so fascinating about these corporations when they buy these companies. It seems to me like, one, that they don't really seem to understand what they're buying, and two, they have these crazy, unrealistic expectations of what the company can do. Did you want to talk a little bit about what was Gamers expecting from you guys? Like, what was this pie in this, maybe it wasn't pie in the sky, but what was this high expectation threshold that even though you guys were doing really well, great, strong numbers on YouTube, all of your projects for the most part were growing, that wasn't good enough?
Yeah, I think most of it comes down to the fact that they were uneducated in how YouTube works today rather than how it worked, 5-10 years ago. So they were extremely obsessed with views and revenue directly from views. So I think Nick has said this publicly before, but one of the things that was kind of put on Nick was that they wanted to get to 10 million views on the Escapist by the end of the year, which is, even with Yahtzee numbers, is unrealistic. And Nick would say this.
What was generally the thought that your numbers were now before? What was the goal? What were the numbers you were at when you guys left versus what was the numbers that they want now, which you just said was 10 million?
Yeah, so I don't know in terms of like how many views we were getting per year, because that was very much Nick's wheelhouse. But in a conversation with Nick, he did mention to us that they wanted this, and he said that it was unrealistic to get that. And I think most of that's because, so for anyone who is an old fan of the Escapist and like knew who I was and stuff like that over there, the difference between the views, say, I or Cultake or In the Frame would get were very different to what Yahtzee would get. And that was fine for us because our philosophy was like, you don't need to hit 1 million views on a video to try and make a certain amount of money off of it. What you need is, there's a saying of like, you only need 1,000 true fans, and then you can make it in any creative industry. And what our drive was like, even though my show back then was only getting between 20 to 30,000 views consistently, a lot of those people were coming and subbing on Patreon for my show, or say Adventurers Nigh or Cultakes or something like that. So to us, those lower numbers didn't mean a negative thing. They were, if they're consistent, those are the people coming to Patreon. But gamers did not view it like this. They viewed shows like Adventurers Nigh, which if anyone who hasn't seen Adventurers Nigh, is our Dungeons and Dragons show. It's a fully animated like massive season show. We have so many editors working on it, and it costs a lot of money to produce. And it only got between 15 and 20, or like on a good day 30,000 views, but most of our patrons were there because they wanted to support Adventurers Nigh. But gamers just see through that and just go, well, it's not getting Yahtzee number views, so it must be failing. And we're like, well, no, look, it's making this much money, drawing in this much money on Patreon, it's drawing this much money in like ad sales, because like Dice Envy want to work with us and make dice for the show. Even though it's getting low views, they understand how dedicated that core audience is. Gamers never viewed it like that and didn't want to put ads on our smaller shows, didn't want to, support our smaller stuff in any way to grow or keep it alive. So that's why they kind of just pulled the plug on everything to their downfall.
Yeah, that really sucks. That is interesting, though. It does feel like the business side doesn't always seem to understand what's going on the content creation side.
Yeah.
And it's like there is a limited audience to some of this. There's only so much. There's only so many numbers that you can realistically expect, which isn't necessarily a negative. Like, it's okay if you have a dedicated but small fan base, and your numbers were reliable. It seems like even your smaller projects, they were hitting the numbers that seemed like you didn't have a huge, you had some highs, but you didn't have a lot of dips, which says to me that what you were doing was working. It was growing. I was a fan. I'm poor, so I didn't do the Patreon, but I think it was doing great. There was growth. So to me, looking at that from working as a writer or as a content creator, it's like, okay, look, what they're doing is working. Just stay the course. Maybe you're not seeing the growth you want now, but give it a couple of years. But unfortunately, they're still, like you said, they're still in this older mindset about views, which if you look at like that, the ad dollars you now get on YouTube per view, it's like an all-time low. That doesn't even make sense, but that's kind of still where corporations' head is at, which makes me, who's on the news side, a little scared, because I'm like, okay, if you don't understand this, if things get worse or there's some kind of weird shakeup, are you just going to wash your hands of us? And I think that's kind of what happened with Nick, where he's like, I'm doing everything you want, guys. You asked me to do all this. I did it. Like, well, don't like that. We changed our minds. It's not good enough. And it's like, well, sorry.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And like, there were loads of problems at The Escapist. One of them was like, we had to move to this kind of different model of trying to generate revenue. Because we didn't have Patreon when I started at The Escapist. It was like a thing that developed as I came in. And one of the reasons for that is because, so The Escapist was like a black hole of videos, and it's no fault of Yahtzee's, but it's like, it is Yahtzee's fault because he's so popular. So basically in YouTube's algorithm, on your own YouTube channel, say you put out a show and it does millions of views, so Yahtzee's show, and then you start a new show that does 20k, 30k views, say like, I don't know, my show or something similar, YouTube will go, well, it's not getting the same amount of clicks because obviously it's a brand new thing. So they stop promoting that content to anyone in the world, but it's in the same way to the subscribers. So my videos would have a life cycle of about 2 or 3 days to get views, and then they would stop being promoted to anyone. Which means that it's very hard to get out of that kind of Yahtzee black hole on The Escapist, and that's where I lived for a few years. And like we discussed, it was something that was fine because the 20, 30k people that were there were coming to support us. But it was really difficult, and we understood that was okay, and especially Nick knew that was okay. But gamers didn't, and they really couldn't get past that. And to kind of prove a point, like to prove that black hole exists, just look at Second Wind. So my most viewed video of all time on The Escapist was a weird Bloodborne video that got hit by the algorithm and got like 120k views. My first video on Second Wind is on like 260k, and the latest one that came out a few days ago is nearly at 100. And it's because this new channel doesn't have this weird black hole disparity in click-through rate. It's pushing it to subscribers more, which means more eyes are getting on it, which means it goes up. So I personally feel like we've escaped that black hole. And I feel like we couldn't have done that unless we started something completely new. Because the discussion was, very early on when we all quit, a discussion was, well, do we try and buy back The Escapist? Like, do we try and, put in an offer and try and get it back? And we decided against that because it's this fresh channel is a way to put all of our shows on the same pedestal rather than keeping it as it was, which was a little bit stagnant. So in a way, gamers have done us an absolutely massive favor. So it's good.
Thank you for saying that, because I was thinking that last night too. I was like, I don't want to insult the guest or get in trouble. But it kind of does seem like that. Like, corporations are not, because the way news is right now, because it's so hard to build a news audience. They're relatively micro, because as many people say, news is a good thing to keep around. Very few people are actually engaging with it, reading it, watching it. It's just very hard to make much of a profit on it. And then corporations, it's not enough just to make a profit, just to have positive revenue. They have to, they have to have incredible growth year after year for infinity. And that just doesn't work. That model and news, they don't really go hand in hand. Maybe that was true back in the 90s, when you had some huge juggernauts. That's kind of the end of the juggernaut. That doesn't work today, especially something like video game news, which is odd because the video games are so popular, but the amount of traction necessarily for full journalism or full design discussion like you do with your show, Design Dale, that is actually kind of a bit of a limited audience.
Yeah.
It's so weird that these companies for whatever reason, they get into these, they buy news. We saw this all over the place, like Disney, you know, they would buy all these companies like Vice, and they had like, oh, Vice will be huge, I'll make $1 billion. And then they end up, you know, selling it for, I think it was like 10 or 20 million.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I feel like corporations in games media are a dying breed, and I think good riddance, because with corporations there are always, they own the thing, so like Escapist, and then there's the CEO above who makes all the final decisions, and then in between are a bunch of middlemen, and they have to justify their jobs. And they are being paid insane salaries for the type of work they do. And a lot of what they do is just prod the creators to make changes to see if that bar goes. And if it's not going up as much as the CEO wants, they start making these drastic changes. And that's what they attempted to do with the Escapist. They attempted to, you know, get rid of everyone who, for them, wasn't making a profit, and keep the people who they thought were necessary to keep the profitable stuff alive. And one of the things that we saw is they fired Nick without understanding how much stuff Nick did. And like, Nick wears like 5,000 hats. He does so many of the jobs. He does sales, he does, you know, he manages all the YouTube stuff, he manages all the socials, he contacts all of the different collaborations we want to go through. He does everything apart from creating the content, which is, you know, like the editing team, me, Frost, and Yahtzee. He did everything else, but the middlemen had no idea that he did that. So when they fired him, everything collapsed, not including all of us leaving. I mean, like, even if we didn't leave and it was just Nick, we probably wouldn't be able to function. And they didn't get that. And it's funny to see that, and I don't mean to speak bad on anyone or wish any ill on anyone, but like the people who were like prodding us and like trying to make all these changes and like basically playing with our lives and our livelihoods and then deciding to just scrap us all. The person who did that, you know, they're head of video, and now they no longer have a video team on their, you know, their biggest channel. So they're probably not long. Their job is not long for this world. It's if you're head of video and one of your actions makes the entire video department quit, oh, it's you're not having a good time.
Just a little bit of a screw up, just a little one.
But then again, they didn't understand. So, you know, maybe they had it coming.
One thing that I respect, and I have huge respect for I mean, I already liked him, but I mean, I like on a personal, professional level, I have huge respect for your boss because he defended his people. Like, he stood in the line of fire. And I've worked long enough in journalism to know that, unfortunately, that often is rare with editors.
Oh, yeah.
And so to see that, and then all of you guys come together and all leave at once, that was beautiful. Like that did honestly move me some, because I was like, oh my God, this is like a TV movie. This is like, oh, what really happened? It was just beautiful, man. It was beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah, it was something that was really inspiring. So, like, you know, when you go to any kind of group of people to work with, you know, it's a common thing to say, we're a family. You know, we're not colleagues, we're a family, and you know, we really care about each other and stuff like that. And we were, before all of this happened. I deeply care about everyone I work with. I think they're unbelievably talented and kind. But after this, we are kind of inseparable now. To the point where we have, you know, I'm a co-founder of Second Wind. All of the full-time members of the Escapist that left, we all basically jumped off of a building in chase of Nick. And like, Nick is fantastic. I love Nick, and but it goes beyond Nick. You know, it's the team, and it's how much we all rely on each other to do the work we do, and support each other creatively, emotionally, in all different ways. And there was no second thoughts with any of us when we were doing this. After all of this happened, we all got messages. We all, hopped in a call to discuss it, to discuss what was happening, because we were like, what is happening? And when Nick suggested, do you know what, this is so messed up. Let's just see if we can do something. Let's just see if we can just do another thing. Let's just do it. And at this point, none of us had been, fully let go or anything. It was just Nick came to us, and because it was all happening so quickly, and not a single person said, well, actually, or I need to check this and I need to do this. Everyone was just like, yep, let's do it. Let's go. And everyone immediately quit. And it was awe-inspiring, like what everyone had seen and had felt, from reading it and seeing it happening. We have been feeling tenfold, and we really believe in this team, to the point where every full-time member on the team is not taking pay until January 31st to try and build up a war chest, or like a sizable base for us, so we know we can support especially the freelancers. So something at the Escapist, through no fault of anyone on the team, especially Nick, as you all know, freelance journalism, if they can stuff you and not pay you properly, they will.
Yes. Very true.
And one of the things we are doing is we're not taking pay, so that we have until January, so we have the means to properly pay the freelancers what they deserve. For all the freelance streams and articles that are going on the Patreon and the videos and stuff, like, we want to make sure that we take care of everyone, and to do that, we are withholding our pay, which is difficult. It's not great. It's an interesting feeling to feel, to see all of this money coming in from Patreon and the success we're having, but to also feel incredibly poor because we're not taking anything.
I bet.
Yet. But yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah, you guys had health insurance. You had pretty good benefits with gamers, especially media. That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. I think the ethics of it and trying to be nice to the freelance team is pretty great. I applaud all that, definitely. What do you think was the key to success here with putting together Second Wind? Why do you think? Because there have been other attempts to put together news sites in a relatively short time. Just around the same time, Aftermath came together. That's mostly made up of former people or that worked at Kotaku or had worked at some other game news sites, that spun off out of Kotaku. But they haven't seen the same kind of, and no insult to them at all, but they haven't seen the same kind of growth or outreach or community support. Do you think the difference is because this was so public and everyone could see it? Do you think it was because Escapist is was very much community driven, so then you could just shift those people over? What do you think was the trick? What made this different than other attempts to try to do a ground, non-corporate owned game news startup?
I think a lot of it with a lot of things that happen is sometimes it's just luck, and we were at the right time, the right place, at the right time. And two things, I guess. One, like you said, the Escapist was extremely community driven. We were very, very dedicated to our community, and we structured all of our content release and also streams around supporting that community, which means when we inevitably all left, the community immediately came with us. And even though that community was small, it was very dedicated. And so that gave us that baseline. But another thing to do with community is that the public nature of how we all resigned and left and immediately followed Nick, especially with Yahtzee, showed to everyone how dedicated we were to our team and the community, and how that was it wasn't a second thought. We just did it, and especially Yahtzee. So it's no lie to say that Yahtzee was the driving force of the Escapist, and he has a very well-earned, huge fan base, and to see him immediately quit in the face of Nick's firing and to follow us as a team shows all of his fans his dedication to us as a team, which is something that I don't think a lot of people saw that side of Yahtzee, because he puts himself forward as a very cynical, kind of sarcastic person. But Yahtzee is one of the sweetest people I've ever met. And he's fantastic, and he's very dedicated to his work, the people he works with, and obviously his family. And I think people got to see a glimpse of that through this whole situation, and got to see that, well, if Yahtzee's... Because he could go to his own channel very easily. It would be no bother to him to just start uploading on his personal channel and to start, making a bunch of money. But that's not what any of us are about. We're about, doing our cool jobs with cool people and trying to be comfortable doing it. And I think the community saw that and thought, let's go support these guys. And Yahtzee said this himself, actually. We have also kind of become a symbol of like anti-corporate greed. And I think a lot of people, and we've seen this in the comments, some people are like, I have no idea who any of you are, but you're like sticking it to the man, so like I'm here to support you. And it's just so many different things are coming together, and we're extremely lucky and grateful to the fact that it is.
No, I think you're correct in the analysis, because it seemed like on Twitter the question in the air was, is Yahtzee going to go with him or not? Is he going to quit? And then once it became known that Yahtzee quit, then people were like, okay, the Escapist is done.
Yep.
Like, that's it. I think so. That's correct analysis. I agree with that. We'll move over here to some other topics, obviously, because you are also a professor, or you're a lecturer, I should say, of game design. You do work as a game developer. You're working on your own projects right now.
Yeah.
The world of... We'll shift over here. We'll do this, and then we'll shift over to game design. The world of game journalism is really weird, in my experience, because it seems like there are just a ton of people who want to get into it. But the number of jobs that there actually are, realistically, I mean, maybe this talks about the so-called ghost jobs, but the number of jobs that actually exist, and then you get those jobs and they actually have like a reasonable wage, whatever term you want to use, for a human to live on, exceedingly rare. And yet, despite everyone knowing that, people still continue to throw themselves upon the tracks and wait for the train to run them over.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? Why do people, even though, and I've made this mistake, like if I could get like a full-time job in game news journalism, I mean, that'd be amazing. And I'd probably get paid, pennies. And so what is it? What is it about game journalism? Why aren't we learning our lesson about these models and these sites? It seems so strange to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like it was something that I did, which was like I was at a kind of turning point in my life, and I thought to myself, if I could do anything, what would I do? And my two loves were I studied multiple things in my life, but the main ones were film and editing and game design. And I was like, I miss editing. I hadn't like done any proper editing work in a very long time, and I was like, I miss it. I love that. How can I combine that with games? And one of the only real ways you can do that is making videos on games. And instead of like trying to pursue something in trailer making in a game design studio or something along those lines, I decided to try and become a YouTuber. And as you said, there's such a small % chance of like having it properly work out, where you're making a reasonable amount of money. And I guess it's just a cool job. Like, to people who don't understand what actually goes into it, on face value, you might think, well, I get to play games for a living. and I get to, I just get to play games, and I get to do everything I find fun for a job. But especially in my case, that is not the case. The videos I make, they take in total around 2 weeks to make. I think maybe a day of that is actually playing a game, and the rest of it is scripting, editing, doing voiceover, animating, like all of this. So I barely get to play games anymore. But I think it's desirable. It's taking a hobby. It's a very front-facing way to take a hobby and then turn it into a career. And people want that to be real. People want that to succeed. And I'm just very fortunate that it has for me.
I think you're right. I think that's also why these companies, they can treat people so poorly, and they have over the last decade and a half. I think it's because of that factor. They're like, oh well, I can do anything because I can replace you this fast.
Yeah, and I think like how you've got to think about it in the sense of like, if there are any people watching who are aspiring to become like YouTubers or working in the games media space, what you need to try and do is make it so that you are not replaceable, and that is very difficult to do. And I've tried to carve out that space with effectively making it so no one but me can make the content I'm making. There's nobody else who could make Design Delve in the way that I can, in my way, and they can't just like replace me on that. So like, it's the same with like Yahtzee on Zero Punctuation. You've got to make it so that people are there for you, not your content, right? And it's the same for the people hiring you. The guys at Second Wind, love them all dearly. We all need each other to function. If one goes, we collapse, because we need each other for all of our projects. And it's about trying to take your skill set and make it your own, and then make that desirable. And for me, going back to game design, that's what I did. So when I first started out on YouTube, I was working for about 7 months, just like working full time on trying to make this YouTube thing work, which is very, very difficult. And I was kind of just making, I don't know how you would call it, like game breakdown videos, but they were more geared towards trying to be funny than they were, and like saying what happened in the game rather than like actually analyzing it. And then somebody came to me, a good friend of mine, Sai, came to me and was like, Jay, you have like a wealth of knowledge on game design. Why aren't you talking about that in your videos? Because I said this really interesting topic on, I'd made a video, did a stream on the video I made, and I described a game design thing that I was thinking about while I was playing it. And somebody was like, why isn't that in the video? Why haven't you said that in the video? And something clicked in my brain, and I was like, yeah, why haven't I said that? And then I started gearing myself towards more game design focused stuff. And that's how you carve out this kind of niche. And it doesn't have to be game design. It doesn't have to be anything, super technical, but like put something into your work that makes your work unique and unique to you. So only you can do it. And yeah, that goes for any YouTube channel or games media thing, in your writing, in your editing, in your VO work, just try your best to get to that. And it will take some time, but I think that will help.
That's pretty good advice. I agree. That is very wise and useful. Okay, so we'll shift over to video games proper. So Game of the Year awards are next week, December 7th. Very exciting. This has been an insane year for games. There have been so many solid releases. We've got new Zelda, Baldur's Gate 3. We had trying to think of the name. I give up. We had a new Star Wars game that was really good. Games all over the place, plenty. And sometimes it felt like during the year, it's like we would go 2 weeks and they're like, oh, this was Game of the Year. Oh no, this is game of the year. And then we just did that over and over and over again. The Hogwarts Legacy, of course, is really big. So crazy, crazy year for games. I'd like to ask you why is it? Why do we? Because it does seem like that we have like some years where we don't have a lot of games that are really, really great, and then other years we have like too many. Why is that? And two, what is your game of the year? I know what mine is, but I want to hear what yours would be.
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I actually don't know. I've been so horrifically busy with this whole second win situation that I don't know the current nominations for Game of the Year. So I might look that up before we quickly discuss this. Let me have a look. Awards. Just so I can actually talk about that before I go into what mine is. Okay. Okay, so the nominations are Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel Spider-Man, Resident Evil 4, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and Tears of the Kingdom. Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, my game of the year isn't actually on the list of for the game of the year.
Okay.
So my game of the year,
that's okay,
is something I made a video on recently, which was the last video that released to date, which was Sea of Stars. I love Sea of Stars to death. I think it's a fantastic study in genre and incredible pacing, and I cannot think of a game in recent memory that has done the JRPG genre that much justice. And I also had the pleasure of making a documentary with the development team, so I feel closely connected to it than maybe some others do. And you can call me biased because of that, and maybe part of that is true, but I still think it is fantastic. I think it is up for some of the awards at Game of the
yeah, definitely the indie. I know it's up for the indie Game of the Year awards. I have to bet it would be on the role playing list. I mean, yeah, I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
And I hope it wins, because that would mean back-to-back Sabotage will win 2 game awards, which is unbelievable to have both of your games ever released win 2 game awards. While I was there, I held the game awards that they have, and my God, those things are heavy. Those things are very, very heavy. But yeah, like that's my overall game of the year. But like for who I would want to win at the Game Awards, I would probably say a close second is Baldur's Gate 3. The most insane writing. I had another video. It's unfortunately been removed, but maybe we'll remake it for Second Wind. I had a video on Baldur's Gate 3 and how to gamify Dungeons and Dragons for the digital space, and that team absolutely smashed it out of the park. And if I didn't feel so deeply connected to Sea of Stars, I think that would be my game of the year.
Okay, I agree. Baldur's Gate 3, that is my GOTY. I mean, I've already interviewed 3 people. I love it. It's so good. I put in like almost 400 hours in that game. And you were right. It's like, how do you make a true Dungeons and Dragons game session but into a game? And it's interesting because you had that, and then you had the Pathfinder, was it Wrath of the Righteous? And those are like 2 entirely different ways to try to take Dungeons and Dragons into a game. Where Path of the Righteous, the Pathfinder games, there's now been 2 of them. They're like more literal, and they're more focused on like the pen and paper stuff, making your character, organizing things. Whereas in Baldur's Gate 3, they focus more like on choices, cinematics, connecting with your characters, almost like how BioWare used to do it. For me, it was like, this is like the spiritual successor to Dragon Age Origins. And I love this game so much. So that would be my choice.
100%. I think like you were completely right when you were saying this year has been like, oh, that's game of the year. Oh, wait, no, that's game of the year. Oh, no, that's game of the year. Because like when I played Tears of the Kingdom at the beginning of the year, I thought that was by far going to be my game of the year. I was in love with Tears of the Kingdom until I made a video on it. Because I made a video on it, and I have this curse where if I make a video on a game, my brain turns off and I never want to play it again. And that's not a conscious thing. I was playing Tears of the Kingdom every day until the video released, and then suddenly my brain switched off. So I need to go back and play that. But I didn't have that feeling with Baldur's Gate. I was really close to finishing it when I was finishing my video, and I was like, I have to try and do every tiny thing I possibly could. I didn't need to for the video. It wasn't on the overall structure of the story or anything. But I was like, I need an excuse to no-life this game, and this is the excuse. So I'm just going to play it as much as I can. I'm waiting to detox so I can go through another playthrough and try and do all of the other stuff that I didn't manage to do. But yeah, it's such a good game.
Yeah, totally brilliant game. You know, speaking of principles of game design, what I really like about Baldur's Gate 3, which makes it a little different, it feels like it doesn't quite fit into, the categories usually put for breadth of game design. It's not really a AAA production exactly. It's almost like a 2.5 because this company, they very much have an indie mindset. When I interviewed Stephen Rooney, who was the writer for Asterion, he covered all the undead stuff. He when he wasn't writing, he was game testing, and he said that's how it is. That's how it's always been at the company. He's been there since Divinity Original Sin 2. It's like you're constantly kind of doing a little bit of everything. And it doesn't matter if your job title is I'm the game writer. They ask you to come and do all this other stuff, which makes it quite a bit different than you typically think of in the world of AAA game design. And especially when you think of bigger companies like Electronics Arts, Ubisoft, they'll just get some company, from Malaysia and just throw as many people at as is possible. Whereas they only really scaled up because they needed help, especially with the cinematics, and that was like beyond their capabilities. But in so many ways, they have that spirit of an indie company, even though they're able to hold on so much more money than usual indie dev can.
Yeah, and it's that's something I hope they hold on to for the next game they work on. I hope this the undeniable insane success of Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't and the money they're receiving doesn't allow them to scale to a point where that's no longer viable. As you said, that is a very indie developer mindset, and it's super beneficial. So one of the problems with game development in the AAA space is that because the teams are so big, the teams are segregated and kept in their own lanes, and they usually only communicate with their own team members and their lead. And then the leads communicate. But the problem there is communication is key. The best game director is a game director who can fully understand every process that is happening to weave these teams together and make them work correctly. I know, so for instance, on my project that I'm working on, The Bog, I am the level designer and I'm also the sound designer. So I do everything to do with level design and also sound. So what that allows me to do is look at other aspects of the game or like how it's being programmed or how the overall planning is working and see if those things are going to be hiccups for level design or sound down the end, down the line. And I can do the same through sound. I can look at a sound I'm implementing and think to myself, is this going to cause our lead programmer any hiccups in implementation? Yeah, I think this might cause a problem. Okay, well, I'll do this different. Which means we don't need to have that conversation a week down the line when he goes to implement my work to be like, this doesn't really work because I've already thought about that. But that only comes from me understanding those things and also being able to communicate with those people. When you're on this big AAA scale, you can't do that. You're kept in your lane. And I really hope more larger 2.5 studios start to kind of take note of this and kind of spread their designers out to touch more aspects of the game's creation, especially sound.
I'm trying to think of 1 second. Okay. Yeah, that's really, I like that kind of thing. I think game design is such a weird area because I guess it's entered this stage now where you are having development teams working on this that dwarf anything else really in media. I mean, you basically have mid-sized towns now working on a Assassin's Creed game. I think about like Ubisoft Singapore, right? And they've now been working on Skull and Bones at least over a decade. And it's being that big, you know, at first you're like, oh, that must be amazing because you can just get so many people on it and you can just brute force it. But that does come at a really big creative cost. And like you were saying, a communications cost where you get to a situation where you're just polishing a turd and you just keep polishing it. I'll just keep polishing it. Eventually this thing's going to turn into gold one day. And you're kind of stuck. Although that's kind of a weird example because they have a weird deal going on with Singapore.
Yeah, it's a weird one there, but I think it's the perfect thing to say though. So like with bigger companies, they have incredible output in speed. So they can have a concept and have it prototyped and implemented incredibly fast. So say you have an environment, you have a gray boxed environment, so the bare bones of an environment. You have, say, 100 environment artists or something stupid like that. You can turn over a fully polished environment in, you know, a week or two, which is unbelievable. But because they're so big and they're so fast, there's no room for testing and there's no room for more communication. So the lighting team and the sound team and the level design team will come in and look at the finished product that they've just churned out and go, yeah, that looks really good, but here are a bunch of problems. Like, here are a bunch of things that could have been caught if they were communicating earlier and if the production was a little bit slower, which seems, you know, counterproductive, but sometimes things being a little bit slower allow you to catch these things, because once you hand in that polished thing, making changes to it is a huge deal. It's like, it's difficult. So when all of these things come in and say, you've got to make this change, this change, this change, this change, this change, those teams are just like, they're messed up. And it's a constant state of hand in a thing is immediately handed back and you have to fix it. That happens 2 or 3 times, and then a designer just decides to scrap it. So that 5 months of work means nothing. And that 100 people's worth of work means nothing. And that just keeps happening and happening and happening and happening. And then you get into the topic of like executives and producers sticking their noses where they probably shouldn't, and having opinions on things that they probably shouldn't. And
a problem in many workplaces.
Yeah, exactly. And then things just get pushed back and back and back. So you're pushing really hard, but the pushback is equally as hard. So it's a difficult. I do not envy the people who work in that environment at all.
Yeah, the human cost, the creative cost. I'm trying to think of the guy. He's a YouTuber now, but he was the designer on designer YouTube. I'll just get his name. This is edited anyways. Timothy Kane. Yeah, Timothy Kane. He makes this point in a video, and he was talking about how development has changed so much in the sense that when you're working with these big companies, it's like, I have this small idea, you know, I could implement, according to him, I can implement this in about 45 minutes. Here, can you go, you know, you're on your lunch break, when you're done with lunch, go and try this out, see if this might work at all, come back to me, let me know what you think. And then the guy comes back and he's got like 3 people with him, and they talk to HR. They're like, we can't do this. We need something laid out. This is going to take, you know, several weeks to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the kind of thing you might be introducing at like a bigger operation, which is true, which goes back to Escapist. When you guys had middle managers and then you had corporate people all over it, you had these layers of people who are sucking, you know, they're sucking all that nutrition for the source that you guys are relying on, and they don't really know what's happening. Having that big structure, which on the outside, like, oh, wow, it's a big company like Gamers. That's amazing. They are so lucky. Everything must be great. And then you're actually in it, and it's like, oh no, actually this is a detriment. This is kind of like the Illithid in Baldur's Gate 3, you know, where they're sucking the brain dry. And people don't really understand that. It's not very intuitive, but it is what happens.
Yeah,
that's so fascinating. It is fascinating. It's terrible, especially if you're working it, but it's fascinating.
It's terrible but fascinating. Yeah, 100%. It's something that like you said, we saw a lot of gamers. So like gamers is probably the most corporate thing I've ever been involved in. Like all of the design stuff I'm involved in is very, very independent. So it was and I don't want to go into like the specific verbiage. But broadly speaking, we would need certain things and certain resources to make more profit. We have laid out, we have proven that if we have this resource and this thing here, we can make more profit, the thing you want. You just need to give us permission to do that thing. It would take gamers a long time. It was no fault of the people there. There were just so many wheels that had to spin to get any form of movement that involved money. And which is fair, because these were large sums of money that were moving, and we can't just, flippantly spend them here and there and just, that's how companies go bankrupt. I completely understand why they were doing it. But it would be that we would say something like, we need this thing to do this thing, and then it would take 6 to 8 months to get that thing, and then they'd go, well, in these 6 to 8 months, you've not upped your profit. And it's like, well, we needed that thing. And they were like, yeah, but well, we're not going to give it to you because your profit's not at the right place. And it's like, okay. We've proven that we can do this. It worked. And it's just there are too many people, there are too many steps that need to be taken to create the thing. My show, I apart from the wonderful artist El Cheshire, who does my backgrounds for my Design Delve show, I am the sole person working on it. I do everything myself, and that is wonderful because I do not have to talk to anyone, and I do not have to ask permission to do anything. Nick has a lot of faith in me, and I massively respect him for this. He just allows me to create. He's a fantastic boss in that sense. He just goes, Jay, you know what you're doing. You know your topic. You've been making this for years. Just go. Just do your thing. And I've experienced times where I've collaborated with people in the past, and that's when I really feel it, because it's another layer of, I need another person's thing to do my job. And through no fault of their own, for their schedules, and this also applies to all of the executives at Gamers, they're doing 1,000 different things. Having that extra roadblock just means the bottom line creative stuff just doesn't get made. And that's exactly what you're saying in game development. We want to prototype this thing, we want to make this thing, we want to see if it works. Well, you can't do that because you got to do all these different things first. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, I know. I think people can relate if it work, if it's like, it feels like we have a lot of work meetings when it actually gets done. Because that time, those resources, they're being eaten up for something that actually in the end isn't very productive.
Yeah.
Have you heard about what's going on with Dave the driver? This is the big controversy. This is what people are talking about. Dave the driver.
No, I have not. I've neither played it or heard what's happening.
Okay. So Jeff Keighley, by the way, who is trying, he and his team are there for the Game Awards. They are trying to up security because they've had now, just in recent years, they've now had 2 people, just random people come up there, which from a security standpoint is terrifying. So I know that's a huge focus. But besides that, Dave the Diver. So this Dave the Diver, which is not really an indie game, it's made by Nexon, which is a South Korean game giant. I think it is a $1 billion company.
Yeah.
They made what looks like an indie game, Dave the Diver. And so that got a nomination for the awards. And people are upset because they're saying, well, how can this be an indie game if it's a $1 billion company that's making it? Yeah, it looks like it's low budget. It looks like an indie game, but is it really? And since you talk about indie game design and you've worked as an indie game designer, you are working as an indie game designer right now. What do you think? What do you think about this argument? I mean, what is an indie game?
That's a really interesting argument. And the comments on this one are going to be very divisive on this specific aspect of our conversation. So I view indie development as somewhere where the development, not the funding, is independent. So our team who are making the Bog, if we develop the game for 2 years and get it to a really highly polished state where it's 70% of the way finished, and it's like so unbelievably polished that a huge publisher comes in, let's say Nexon come in and we're like, we love the look of your game, we would like to pay you the remainder resources you need to finish this game and make it even better. Here's $1 million to go finish the game. But we spent 80% of the time in development not being paid and working by ourselves, but we just got the last bit funded. Does that then make us not an indie development team anymore? And if we keep it independent, because I think a lot of people think that if a game has been properly published by a big publisher, it's no longer indie. I mean, like, if Dave the Diver, I know nothing about it, so this doesn't apply to Dave the Diver. I'm just talking from my experience. If Dave the Diver was made by a team of 100 people and was churned out in a year and then was, all funded by Nexon, then that's not indie, in my opinion. You're not independently doing it. You're not independently working on it. And I guess the real question is, at what point does a company stop being indie? Like, at what point is it the amount of people? Is it the how you are funded? Is it if you have like a corporate kind of overlord structure? It's a really tough question. It's like defining genre in games. Like, there are so many but this, or actually, it's so hard to define. But for me, it would be how many people worked on it, and were they funded entirely by Nexon from the get-go to try and make an indie adjacent title to try and get a different crowd. It's a really tough question.
Yeah, it is, because indie games are so widely varied. It seems to be a very, very loose term. I think of a game like Stardew Valley, literally a development team of one.
Yeah.
But that game has massive support from some huge companies and it's made a ton of money. So it's like, when does Stardew Valley go from an indie game to actually now you're one of the big boys? And maybe we should ask why that matters. Like it's important from like a business perspective, but why should it matter to gamers that the end product is a good indie game or a bad corporate game? I mean, for me, at least as a player, what matters is the game itself, what churns out at the end. I mean, I love talking about game design and all that is important, but from a gamer's perspective, I don't know why they would care so much. But people obviously do, because this discussion is very heated. There's a bunch of articles about it, and I've already saw on Reddit and Twitter people getting very vehemently angry about the topic, which isn't hard to do on social media, but it seems like a little bit more vitriolic than normal.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I think a part of it, and this loops back to kind of like what we're doing at Second Wind, I think subconsciously a lot of people have this like anti-corporate mentality of like, a lot of people like supporting indie games, even though the quality can widely vary for lots of different reasons. People like to support indie games because they feel like they're supporting a creator, and a creator or creators that are not making a lot of money, and they're doing something out of passion. But the trick is that a lot of AAA developers are not making a lot of money and doing stuff out of passion. They're just doing it for a corporation above them, which sucks. And that gets into another topic of AAA and like the turnover rate there. But yeah, I think people get defensive over that definition of indie, because like, when does it stop being you're supporting a indie developer? Would I be upset if Dave the Diver, let's say if it had a team of 100 people, was entirely supported by Nexon, would I be upset if it won the indie award over Sea of Stars? Yes. But that's because I've been in the Sabotage studio and spent a lengthy amount of time with them and know how small their team is. So to know how small they are, to see the product they put out is unbelievable. But that's because I know that. And I think people feel that when they see indie developers and they follow them. You know how many people are working at Team Cherry on Silksong, and you're invested in that game coming out and being good and doing well because you want the developers to succeed and you want them to win. It's like an underdog kind of story. You want to see the big corporations lose and you want to see the indie developers win. So when a big corporation tries to label itself as the underdog, you go, oh, no, you're not. You've got billions of dollars, huh? You don't care if this makes a profit. It doesn't affect your life. So I guess that's where it's coming from.
It's probably also like, this is just where Western culture and politics is now, where it's like my ideal thing that I'm attached to and love versus the most terrible version of the other. So people are probably thinking, like, I love Shovel Knight. Like I kind of want a Shovel Knight thing on my tombstone. That's how much I love that game.
Yeah.
And I think Shovel Knight, and I think like Ubisoft, like one of those terrible, they do so many where it's, I'm embarrassed. I should know all this. No, maybe not. Jack Ryan. It's not Jack Ryan. What is it?
Tom Clancy?
Thank you. One of the many Tom Clancy games. Completely forgettable. And it's like, I'm thinking my Shovel Knight versus a terrible Tom Clancy game. And it's like, in my mind, it's like, oh, this is so special and important. That's just terrible. Go away. We don't want to. I could see why I would get really invested in that. I could understand the emotional resonance.
You think like that Shovel Knight is art, right? This is art made by artists, and I am cultured for liking this thing. But like Tom Clancy is a massive franchise that just churns out, games out of nowhere. Or like for me, it's, Assassin's Creed is that for me. Like it's just I feel they are just churned out nowadays. And but then something like Sea of Stars, it's just like, oh yeah, this is trying to do something cool and like artsy, and like I think there's a tiny bit of like, and I hope nobody is going to take offense to this because I'm putting myself in the same boat. There's a tiny bit of like pretentiousness of it, of like, oh yeah, I'm supporting the artists and stuff like that. And like, but by de facto, I am an artist. I'm an auteur for liking this. But like in a small degree, I think we all feel that.
Yeah, I've struggled with this because one of my favorite games ever growing up was Star Ocean 2: The Second Story. They just came out with a remake. And I feel like the pretentious guy, is all these newfangled inventions, like it skips the farming for you. I was like, oh, you don't understand. That's so important.
You don't get it.
So important. You waste, weeks of your life leveling your character for this game.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me. It's hard for me to let go and like, okay, other people can enjoy this game in this different way.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's hard. Like I actually get mad if I think about it too much.
You know the feeling well. I think, yeah, I'm guilty of that feeling too. But it's just something that we have to come to terms with as consumers and game enjoyers. It's that kind of like hipster kind of mentality of like, I like this thing because it's niche and it's like not many other people like it, and then when it becomes popular, the hipsters stop liking it because they're like, oh yeah, I was into that back in 2016, and I think we've all got a little hipster inside of us that we're fighting, but like you said, it's just coming to terms with the fact that like, if somebody is enjoying a thing and they are deriving enjoyment from it and they're getting joy, let them do it. Like it's who are we to poo-poo on like Jesse from the Escapist, wow, Second Wind, been doing that
it's a hard habit to break.
It is. Jesse Galena from Second Wind has a beautiful phrase that I will never forget, which is don't let me yuck on your yum. It's like, don't let me don't let me put down the thing that you enjoy just because, you know, I don't agree with it, or I think something else is better or something like that. If you love it, go for it. You know, like there's a niche and there's an audience for like any type of content, any type of game. And just embrace that, and embrace what you're into, and embrace what other people are into as well. And just live your best life, basically.
All right, I agree. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. We will start wrapping this up here. I have to ask, so for your new videos, you have your little avatar character, and you have a dog named Ludo. Is Ludo a real dog? Is that the name of your dog?
So because this is pre-recorded, yes, and I will go get her. Give me a second.
This is very exciting. We're going behind the scenes. We're breaking records. You can't get this content anywhere else, folks.
Yeah, I apologize. I pretend.
Oh, you are fine. You're fine.
So Ludo is indeed real.
Awesome. Hello, Ludo.
Ludo is real. And she is the light of my life. I absolutely adore this dog. And she's lovely. And she does have a white belly and white feet. Gosh, good girl.
Yeah, she does look like
she
does look like the character.
Yeah,
the character looks like her.
Yeah, she's got little white feet, a little belly. She's like Omar Ahmed, amazing video editor, leader of the editing team at Second Wind. Basically took a picture of her and made her digital. So is in every way. Yeah, she's a good girl.
Yeah, I know the things I put up with.
She's wonderful.
That's how my dogs are too, Ludo.
Yeah,
that is a pretty dog. It's what breed is the dog? Do you mind me asking?
She is I wish my camera would focus. She is a Clumber poo. So it's a Clumber Spaniel and a poodle. So my vet said that they were rare. So that's not really it's not really a crossbreed you see much. But they're very similar to what are they called? Cockapoos or like golden doodles and stuff like that. Like it's a crossbreed with a poodle.
Okay, so not exactly a designer dog, but kind of similar.
Yeah, kind of.
No, I have two dogs. I have a Bichon and I have a Bichon poodle mix. No allergies. But I know your dog is beautiful.
Yeah,
a really nice looking dog.
And I hope she generates the views. You know, like people love Ludo. A common thing I see on Twitter now is Ludo is great and a human is okay too. And I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that like now that my show has started to, you know, catch some traction, I have now become a secondary character in my own show. And that's okay. You know, I'm okay with that.
Oh, that Ludo likes the sound of that.
Yeah, she loves it.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show today, JM8. I love your videos. I love what you guys are doing now at Second Wind. I really appreciate you taking the time. You talk about game design in such an interesting way.
Thank you.
It makes me really think about it. And I don't get a lot of exposure to that world. That's not really my world. So I appreciate the videos you do and taking the time to be here. Is there anything you would like to end on or share with the audience?
I guess I would say check out all of our content on Second Wind. I've been very fortunate to try to get some traction with my show, but there are a lot of other creators on there who have been struggling to find that traction when we're on the Escapist. That goes for you know, all the other video content such as Darren Mooney's new show that released today, and that goes for all other freelancers on the streaming channel. You know, Amy, Casey, Jesse. Will, you know, like fantastic creators, and we're hoping to get them, you know, like more work and, you know, to be hopefully brought on full time in the future. So please don't neglect those other people. I massively appreciate all the support that's being thrown my way, but please check them out as well.
Yeah, definitely. You guys, if you're interested, you can find JM8 and Ludo on Twitter at JM8, so letter JM and then the number 8 and Ludo. And you can find that there. And of course, everything going on YouTube. And I like Darren Mooney. I mean, I disagree with him a lot, but he's usually very interesting in his takes and analysis.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, well, we are going to end it here, folks. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch Culturescape today. Culturescape is put together with the help from Bain Books publishing wonderful science fiction books, imprint of Simon & Schuster, and of course, Young Voices, a journalism advocacy organization. And this wouldn't be possible without viewers like you. So until next time, my friends, keep geeking out.